Has anyone died from your school? If so, how did they die, and how did it make you feel? One of my classmates died of a ruptured aneurysm when I was 12. It was quite a shock to realize someone my age could just die. I'd lost my grandmother 3 years earlier in a car accident, but she was old. Old people are supposed to die eventually. Kids you go to class with, on the other hand, that was difficult to come to terms with. A new girl joined my homeroom group one year and hung out with myself and my 3 other friends every recess, and we showed her around the school, taught her how the school worked and things like that. She was a boarder at the school because I think her parents worked overseas. After maybe 8 weeks at the school, she died overnight from a sudden diabetic low as she was type 1 diabetic. The most amazing math teacher started missing days, escalating taking leaves for doctor's appointments because of cataracts. One day he left early and never came back. It turned out that the doctor's appointment were trips to radiation and chemotherapy, and that his cataracts were tumors in his eyes that had metastasized into stage 4 brain, spine and liver cancer. He was an angel of a human. Every time the class had to take tests he'd give out dum-dum lollipops. He could have stopped teaching and taken sick leave. He could have used his life savings to travel a farewell life vacation, but instead, even dying, he spent his last months, weeks, down to days teaching his students. He was a true hero. A lot of memories of him make me cry, but none compare to the 5 minutes before he left. As the principal took over the class, he stood at the front of the classroom and said, "I'm going to be taking some time off. You might get some sad news. Sometimes the world isn't the fairest place, like sometimes how your parents might blame you for something your sibling did, but please remember it's not any of your faults. Please don't be scared or sad, it's a happy vacation with my mom and I know it's coming. While I'm gone, please promise me something. Promise you'll be good." The whole class promised. He gave us each a hug and left. 3 days later he succumbed to cancer in his sleep. Even now, in our 20s, of the classmates I still talk to, none of them can eat dum-dum lollipops without crying. In 3rd grade, a girl in my class was hit by a car while trick-or-treating on Halloween night. Her parents were devastated. One day she was there and the next she wasn't. Someone I didn't know personally had a car accident and we've all heard from school. However, later 2 young boys came to our class and told us a nice story about him, and then our teacher was trying to hide her tears. I graduated high school 13 years ago. There's been a lot of deaths, especially considering how small of town my high school was in. While I was in high school there were some kids who died in car accidents. More car accidents after I graduated too. One guy I knew drank himself to death. Another girl was beaten to death by her boyfriend. There's been at least 1 suicide I know of. The worst was a personal friend of mine who died from a heart problem while he was driving from the UGA campus in Athens, GA to my hometown. His car went off the road and he was found dead days later. I think he might have survived for a while stuck in there because they found pings from his phone off of a cell tower. A girl that went to our school's sister was kidnapped, raped, beaten and bound in a blanket with chains before being thrown into the river. They still don't know if she was alive or dead before they tossed her in. Lost a few casual acquaintances to suicide. In 2014, a friend of mine who was like a baby brother passed away following a bike accident. He was the sweetest person I've ever known, with a smile that lit up our entire day. He was on ventilator support for 2 weeks, and they gave up trying to revive him. I heard the news of his death on the day I started my new job, and I just remember collapsing to the floor and wailing with absolute anguish. His birthday is day after tomorrow. He would have turned 25. Edit. Thank you all for the kind words. I'm absolutely blessed and grateful to have gotten to know a person like him in this lifetime. There was not one person he met who he failed to bring a smile to. He made everyone fall in love with him. We all have a lot to learn from him. Regardless of whether there is a heaven, he definitely made us feel like we were already there. To everyone on this thread sharing his birthday, happy birthday in advance. Cherish every moment. Many suicides in my school, but none from my grade. However, our sophomore year we had 2 classmates who got in a fight about an old paintball match. So one of them shoots the other with his dad's shotgun. It was no accident either. When the details were released, he confessed to grabbing the gun, pointing it, click. He pumped it, click. He then reached into a dresser, grabbed a shell, pump, bang. Our friend was halfway out the sliding door. When police arrived, the murderer was sitting on the couch, eating a Hot Pocket. They were both 16 years old. Edit, I realized I missed the second half of the question. I was singing in a concert when I found out, and I couldn't believe it when I heard it. My route home just happened to take me by his house, and there were 7 police vehicles, in my small town, basically the entire city police, and I was shell-shocked and broke down when I got home. The next day seemed so surreal. Every class was just trying to talk about what a guy the victim was. No real learning happened that day. Every hallway had kids hugging and crying. My class has lost quite a few to suicide and a couple to ODs, but the one that sticks with me most actually happened once we graduated. One of my classmates got married and moved to Missouri with her husband. They quickly had 4 kids. I watched as her life progressed on Facebook and I'm genuinely happy for her. They are getting ready for a vacation. They never make it. All 6 die in a car crash on the way there. Her husband, and her 4 kids under 6, the youngest one only 8 months old. Maybe it's the fact that the young kids died that gets me the most, but I remember how weird it was after the fact, because I'd seen her posts a lot as they prepared for the trip. Then suddenly, they all just stopped. I had just started university. Every class I would sit next to this one person. We had a lot in common and became quite close friends in just a couple of months. There was a car accident. She died instantly and her boyfriend who was driving died on the way to the hospital. I hadn't read the news that day. Another friend from class called me and I heard something was wrong. I can still hear his voice saying, "Friend is dead." I opened the news on my phone and I saw her face on the front page. I screamed crying. I couldn't breathe. They were both only 19. I went to her and her boyfriend's joint funeral. Her mother threw flower petals as their caskets were lowered into the ground. You can imagine this as a beautiful scene. But she was screaming, crying. Her husband had to hold her back. I've been to quite a lot of funerals, but this is by far the most heartbreaking. It's been 5 years. I still see her sometimes. Like someone who has her hair color, or eyes, or voice, or laugh, or says things she would say. I sometimes wish I could have switched places with her. She had so much life, so much energy, so much happiness. And I've spent most my life suicidal. One of the things keeping me alive now is the feeling that I have to live for her. My best friend committed suicide. It was devastating. He didn't say anything and he seemed so happy. He messaged me asking if I had some charcoal to barbecue the night before it happened. When they found him, he had attempted carbon asphyxiation by putting charcoal in a garbage can and burning it in his garage. That didn't work, so he tried his car too and it didn't work as well, so he shot himself. He tried getting me to bring him the charcoal he wanted to kill himself with. And my other friend was the one who bought him the shotgun rounds because he wanted to go hunting. Depression doesn't always have the most obvious signs. What made me feel the worst though is people who never talked to him, even the super popular who had made fun of him and acted like he didn't exist went to his funeral and were telling people how they cared for him so much and wish they could have helped. It made me sick. We have at least one student who commits suicide every year at my school. Girl from my school got shot in the neck by her dad who was cleaning his rifle in the kitchen. Mom and dad sold the house, pretty sure divorce happened too. They moved away. Another girl got raped/murdered on New Year's Eve. It was freezing out, she just needed warmth. Found the wrong person to ask for help. One of my classmates drowned while trying to save his brother. His mother called me to let me know. That was one heart-wrenching conversation. A friend of mine went on a 30-day backpacking trip to Denali with a group just after the end of his junior year. He was already an experienced winter hiker before the trip. This was a training outing for bigger hikes on bigger mountains in other parts of the world. He disappeared one night when the group was camping on/near a glacier field. He was just gone. No struggle, nothing amiss, just gone. They never found his body. The best guess of what happened was that he went to pee or maybe get water in the middle of the night, but was so groggy he forgot to put on his crampons, slipped on the ice, and slid into one of the cracks in the glacier, fell hundreds of feet into the almost frozen meltwater at the bottom, and eventually washed out to sea. I have always hoped that he hit his head on the ice when falling. The thought that he might have slid for a few seconds, only to feel the falling sensation for a while before understanding that he was about to die, well, that terrifies me. When I was 14, my best friend died. We were doing sports at school and during the warm-up she fell backwards and smacked her head on the floor. She was still conscious but extremely dazed. The teacher ran to call an ambulance and I held her until they came. When she got to hospital she was put in an induced coma to try and stop the swelling on the brain. A week later her mom and brother had to make the decision to switch her life support machine off as there was too much brain damage. She was an amazing person and I still miss her 19 years later. The last thing she said to me was, "Is my hair still okay?" I had a classmate who was the class clown and went out of his way to make people laugh. He hanged himself in 2011. Turns out his clown act was a mask to hide his depression. Sad. Nephew of the school's owner was a close friend of mine. Having asthma attacks since morning and was brought to the nearest hospital. Sadly, he didn't made it. When I saw his lifeless body, I cried my heart out, with his classmates, teachers and his grandma. I was afraid to see a dead body, but when I saw him, I felt so devastated. My school had a small line of trees out the front with each tree representing a student from the school that had died. I believe most if not all were from car crashes. I still remember the silence in the classroom after one of these crashes. I didn't personally know the girl, but there were other kids that were hit pretty hard. Like and subscribe for more videos.